It's July 7th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's plan to issue its own assessment of the Fukushima wastewater. The government will announce its independent examination on Japan's plan to release the wastewater at 11 a.m. Korea time. The chief of the IAEA is also coming to Seoul tonight to explain the UN agency's final report. President Yoon will head to Lithuania next Monday to attend the NATO Summit, where a separate bilateral sit-down with Japan's Prime Minister is being arranged to discuss the wastewater release plan. Russian leader Putin's forces raid the chief of Wagner Group, Evgeny Pergozin's St. Petersburg mansion in an apparent move to discredit him, while the Wagner boss is reportedly back in Russia, not Belarus. In the coming hours, the South Korean government is set to release its independent review of Japan's Fukushima discharge plan. Now, that announcement also comes ahead of the IAEA chief's arrival in Seoul tonight for a 3-day visit. Our Pin-ji starts us off.
As anxiety and anger grow over Japan's planned release of Fukushima wastewater, South Korea on Friday will issue a report containing its own assessment of the matter.
Based on data collected from the on-site inspection of the Fukushima nuclear power plant and the information Japan has unveiled so far, our government has been conducting its own independent review of Tokyo Electric Power Plant's plan to discharge wastewater.
Announcing the plan, the government said the review is in its final stage, following a 2-year process. It's expected to include the South Korean government's overall assessment of the discharge plan, as well as some suggestions for Japan. This coincides with the chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi's visit to South Korea, scheduled from Friday to Sunday. He plans to head to Seoul after wrapping up his trip to Japan to meet with Foreign Minister Park Jin and the chairperson of the Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, Yoo Ki. Earlier on Tuesday, the IAEA released a comprehensive report approving Japan's plan to release the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean, saying it meets international safety standards. And as the Japanese government seeks more support from neighboring countries, the leaders of South Korea and Japan will likely meet next week. The presidential office said Thursday that it's working with Tokyo to arrange a meeting between President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the NATO Summit in Lithuania. A senior official from the presidential office said if the meeting does take place, the two leaders are expected to discuss the Fukushima wastewater issue. Arirang News.
President Yoon will attend the NATO Summit in Lithuania next week and stop by Poland to discuss cooperation on Ukraine and more. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young has more on his itinerary.
President Yoon will discuss support and reconstruction for Ukraine at the NATO Summit next week in Lithuania and make a state visit to Poland, rolling out Seoul's defense and self-diplomacy in Europe. Yoon's office said Thursday that the South Korean leader will attend the 2-day security meeting in Vilnius, focusing on increasing two-way cooperation between the 31-member alliance and the Indo-Pacific region, beginning with the war in Ukraine.
The president will lay out South Korea's contributions to peace in Ukraine, one of the most important issues among the international community, and will concretely set forth our global responsibility diplomacy.
A senior official said while it's unlikely Seoul will issue a completely new support package for Kyiv, it continues to factor in the complex circumstances in Ukraine and Russia and consult other nations on aid provision. Also, Seoul and NATO will adopt a new document to institutionalize cooperation in 11 areas, including non-proliferation, cybersecurity and emerging technologies. North Korea will also be on the agenda, with Seoul and NATO countries jointly warning that Pyongyang's illegal actions will not be tolerated as the regime develops its nuclear capabilities. On that note, Yoon will meet with NATO Secretary General on Tuesday and hold over 5 bilateral summits along with various multilateral engagements. The president himself will moderate a 4-way summit with other NATO partner nations, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, and a separate bilateral sit-down with Tokyo is currently being arranged. Crossing the border to Poland on Wednesday, Yoon will meet with South Korean nationals before holding a bilateral summit with his counterpart Andrzej Duda on Thursday, followed by subsequent meetings with the Prime Minister and parliamentary speakers. Branching out Seoul and Warsaw's burgeoning trade ties, Yoon will attend 3 main business events, which include a business forum, a conversation with local Korean firms, and notably, a discussion with Korean companies on reconstruction efforts on Ukraine.
The president will be joined by an 89-member economic delegation, including not only firms in industries like batteries, defense, and nuclear power plants, but also many construction firms interested in rebuilding Ukraine. We will listen to their entry strategies and bottlenecks and discuss the government's support measures.
A senior official told reporters that a trip to Ukraine is not on Yoon's itinerary, nor is it currently being arranged. However, the president will hold bilaterals with more than 10 countries, excluding Poland, next week, not only to expand Korea's diplomatic and trade ties, but also to strengthen its bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the city of Busan. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Wagner Group chief Evgeny Pergozin is reportedly back in Russia, not Belarus. And Russia's clear efforts to discredit him reached new heights with leaked images of his mansion. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Footage released Wednesday by Russian state TV channel Russia 1 TV showed the Kremlin's FSB security service as it raided the office and villa of Wagner Group chief Evgeny Pergozin. The channel's coverage strongly condemned the Wagner Group chief, calling him a traitor over the last month's short-lived insurrection. Contrary to Russian President Vladimir Putin's pledge that he won't be prosecuting Prigozhin as part of a deal brokered by the Belarusian leader, it seems Moscow may actually be making a move to punish the Wagner chief for his role in the armed rebellion against the state. Meanwhile, pro-Kremlin media outlet Izvestia also shared images it obtained of the raid on Prigozhin's home, which showed a large collection of guns, a shelf of wigs, and a medical room. Images also showed fake passports that may belong to the Wagner chief, as well as gold bars and piles of cash, with Russian media portraying him as a greedy and violent petty thief. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, however, downplayed the raid, saying the government has no interest in Prigozhin.
We don't track his movements. We neither have the opportunity to nor wish to do that.
Despite reports last month that Prigozhin may be in exile in Belarus, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said Thursday that the Wagner Group head is in St. Petersburg and not in Belarus. According to the BBC, his private jet had previously been tracked flying to Belarus in late June and returning to Russia the same evening. It also made several flights between St. Petersburg and Moscow, but it was not clear if Prigozhin was on the plane himself. Lukashenko also added that the rest of the Wagner fighters were still at their bases, which could mean eastern Ukraine or a training base in Russia. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
The world is getting hotter day by day. In fact, seeing the hottest days on record for 3 straight days this week. Let's turn to our Choi Soo-hyung for details.
The global average temperature exceeded 17 degrees Celsius from 3 consecutive days from Monday until Wednesday this week, setting a new record. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has announced that on July 5th, the world average temperature recorded 17.18 degrees Celsius, surpassing the previous record of 17.01 degrees on the 3rd. Before this week, the previous highest global average temperature was 16.92 degrees Celsius in August 2016. Experts predict the record may soon be broken again, given the warm ocean temperatures caused by El Niño and the impact of climate change.
It is warming and it's the warmest we've ever seen, but also if you continue on that trajectory, it becomes the coolest summers that we will experience for the next couple of years.
Experts point out that El Niño has not yet reached its peak. Data released on Thursday by the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service shows that the world experienced the hottest June on record since its observation began. Its temperature recorded 0.53 degrees higher compared to the June average over the last 30 years.
It's within the realm of the climate is warming, and we are starting to see events that remind us that the climate change is real.
Officials forecast July this year to be the hottest month since the last interglacial period, approximately 120,000 years ago. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Japan could release the Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean technically whenever it wants. In fact, as early as next month. Then how smooth will the process be? For more, we're joined by Professor Song Se-ryun this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
The IAEA has technically given the go-ahead for Japan's plan to release the wastewater. Now, does that mean Japan can take action without seeking consent from anybody now? I mean, are there no legal issues that could stand in the way?
Well, technically, yes. IAEA is an intergovernmental organization within the UN system that seeks to promote, and the word is promote, not regulate, the peaceful use of nuclear energy and preventing weaponizing it, and also ensuring nuclear safety. So its power is the reports it generates. It reports to General Assembly and Security Council in the UN system, but it does not have the authority to permit or prohibit the release. So the decision by the Japanese government to release their treated water rests solely on its country authority. But of course, it also comes with diplomatic and also potentially legal consequences that it might generate. For example, for now, the IAEA said that given the standard we know, it does not have the harmful effect on the environment and the health. But that also limits the premise that, as far as we know, that's the case. But going forward, there might be adverse impacts that are discovered. And also, there are other international laws, for example, UNCLOS, which is a United Nations Convention of the Laws of the Sea, also might play a role where Japan could be a subject of responsibility if any adverse impacts surfaces. And also, IAEA, it's not the final result of this matter. The ongoing monitoring and also the compliance with various standards with the IAEA is an ongoing matter. So it will continue to play the role.
Right, so staying with those possible legal consequences, now you've mentioned, well, we all know that not everybody is happy with IAEA's report, right? Mainly Japanese fishermen and also countries like China. I mean, can those who are opposed to the plan take legal action? Is that possible?
Well, first and foremost, I think for now it's a diplomatic matter. But as I mentioned earlier, they can bring it to IAEA if any of the premises that we're surmising is found to be untrue, if there are environmental matters and also human rights violations because of the adverse impacts on the habitats and the human health. Those would constitute a violation of the international laws. So they can bring it to, if it's appropriate, to IAEA, and also you can bring it to ICJ, International Court of Justice, if they can substantiate the international law violations. Of course, there's always a problem of the jurisdiction. Japan has accepted the compulsory jurisdiction necessary for adjudication, but it does have extensive reservation clause. For example, they don't agree to be subjected to the marine life matters. So we have to see whether it works out to be a jurisdictionally feasible. But there are chances to be brought into the adjudicating body in the international law forums. But for now, probably they need more investigation if that were to happen.
Right, you've just hinted at possible legal consequences, but the question is, what might a worst-case scenario look like? I mean, could it be trouble over the much controversial seafood imports from the Fukushima region? What could the worst-case scenario?
Well, at this point, the IAEA and also science community is looking at our experiences before and cases before. For example, you have a Chernobyl island and also 3 Mile Island matters. So the data generated from those is being a guide to the regulations and the standard that we are using. But of course, those do not really have generated the long-term effect sufficiently enough. So the worst case scenario probably is that we'll discover that there is a very adverse effects going forward. Mm-hmm. And also another worst effect probably is coming from a political sector where, as the opposition party is claiming at this point, all the imports from the Japanese region should be banned. Probably, if that kind of legislation passes, probably it'll generate a diplomatic matters and also probably a dispute not in the IAEA ground, but also World Trade Organization. That is because might be seen as a retaliatory matter or undue burden on the free trade in the world. So it can branch out to different matters domestically and also in diplomatic matters.
Right. Just Japan releasing of the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean can spread into other issues in broader fields, like you mentioned. Now, like you said, South Korea's main opposition Democratic Party is saying that it's going to push to pass a bill on banning any seafoods imports from that area. Now, how likely is that such a bill would actually be passed?
Well, the Minju Party has the votes to carry in the National Assembly. Mm-hmm. But of course, it has to pass or balance the power mechanism. So I think a lot of people will predict that the president might veto the bill. But other than the procedure in the National Assembly, you have to think about what kind of political landscape it will create. I think there would be a domestic opposition from those people engaged in the business and the fisheries. And as I mentioned, if that becomes a law, probably Japan will seek to oppose it in the WTO and other venues and cause some diplomatic relations. So I think that the strategy to make it into the legislation probably is not going to be a good idea going forward in the short term, because if you don't have the further evidences that will refute what IAEA is saying scientifically and also policy-wise, probably that's not going to be well played out in the legal arena. And also diplomatically, they would not have a probably forceful argument that the harm will merit the extensive and also drastic measure such as a total import ban.
Right. All right, Professor Song, thank you as always for your insights. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Tap water here in Seoul, dubbed Arisu, is very safe to drink. The Seoul Metropolitan Government on Friday announced the publication of the 2022 Arisu Quality Report, which contains results of the air quality inspections of Seoul's tap water. Arisu was certified very safe, as elements like lead, arsenic, and cadmium were not detected. The city also explained that its tap water not only meets drinking water quality standards, but is also good for health as it contains abundant minerals. Seoul says it has a checklist of 350 items for its annual quality report, far more than the 166 recommended by the World Health Organization.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Ukraine. Search and rescue operations are underway in the western city of Lviv, where a Russian missile struck an apartment building on Thursday. At least 6 people have been killed and over 30 others wounded. Lviv Mayor Andriy Sadovyi says that as many as 50 apartments and 50 nearby vehicles have been damaged, and that people may still be trapped under the rubble. He called the missile strike, quote, one of the biggest attacks on the city. Russian state TV has claimed that the target Russia hit was a defense academy and not a residential building. Ukraine's military said it shot down 7 out of 10 caliber cruise missiles that were heading in the direction of Lviv. The strike comes after 13 people were killed last week in the city of Kramatorsk after a Russian missile hit a restaurant and shopping center. Now, turning over to South Africa, at least 17 people, including 3 children, have been killed after inhaling toxic gas on Wednesday evening on the outskirts of Johannesburg. The deadly nitrate oxide gas came from a leaky gas cylinder in a shack located in the informal settlement of Boksburg. Officials have linked the cylinder to illegal mining operations. The gas is often used by illegal miners to pull gold from soil removed from abandoned mine shafts and processed above ground. Johannesburg was historically a gold mining hub. It's now home to a number of abandoned mine shafts that have been taken over by illegal miners. The incident comes 6 months after Boksburg saw 41 people killed on Christmas Eve when a gas tanker exploded. Now, according to Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, 30 million new users signed up for Meta's new social media app, Threads, on its launch day. The app is largely viewed as an alternative platform to Twitter for users unhappy with recent changes under the ownership of Elon Musk. Officially launched on Wednesday, the app offers Twitter-like features such as posts with a character limit and a space for real-time conversations. Threads also allows users to sign into the app using their pre-existing Instagram account, allowing them to follow accounts they already know. But critics say that the Threads collects more personal data than its Twitter counterpart, including health, financial and browsing history. Its data collection is the reason the app is not available in the EU. And finally, Europe's heavy-lift rocket Ariane 5 has flown its final mission, delivering 2 telecom satellites into orbit. It blasted off on Wednesday evening from the European spaceport in French Guiana. The Ariane 5 served Europe for almost 30 years. It had a reliable service record with only 2 failed missions out of a total of 117. It also accurately launched the James Webb Space Telescope in December 2021. The reliable rocket is being retired due to its high production cost, amid rising competition from American satellite launch firms. Its replacement, the Ariane 6, is expected to make its first flight next year.
Good morning. Those in the upper regions of the country need to brace for seasonal heat, while down south, people need to stay safe in downpours. Monsoon rain is already dropping heavy showers on 전라남도 and Jeju, which will gradually spread to the rest of the southern parts of the country. Now, the south coast and Jeju Island could see up to 150 millimeters along with strong winds. So a heavy rain advisory has been issued for parts of 전라남도 and Jeju, while upper regions will have sweltering heat with heat advisories being in place for parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. The south will get heat relief this afternoon with that showers. Now the Gwangju sees a high of 25, but Seoul and Chuncheon top out at 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. The south coast and Jeju Island will see on and off rain through early next week, while the rest of the country will see sudden passing rain. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.